She couldn't make out what had happened at all. Was it really a sheep that was sitting on the other side of the counter? She would. She could make nothing more of it. She was in a little shop, little, leaning with her elbows on the counter, and opposite to her was an old sheep sitting in a knitting and every now and then leaving off to look at her through a great pair of "What is it you want to buy?" the sheep said at last, looking up for a moment. "I don't quite know yet," Alice said very gently. "I should like to look all if I might." "You may look in front of you and on both sides, but you can't look all round you, unless you've got eyes in the back of your head." But these, as it happened, Alice had not got, so she contented herself with looking at the shelves as if she came to them. The shop seemed to be all manner of curious things, but the oddest part of it all was that whenever she looked hard enough to make out exactly what it had on it, that particular shelf was always, though the others round it were crowded as full as they could hold. "About so, here," she said at last in a plaintive tone, after she had spent a moment in vainly pursuing a large bright thing that looked sometime like a doll, sometime like a work-box, and was always in the shelf next above the one she. "This one is the most provoking of all, but I'll tell you what," as a sudden thought struck her, "I'll follow it up to the very top shelf of all. I'll puzzle it to go through the ceiling, I expect." But even that failed. The next went through the ceiling as quietly as possible. We're quite used to it. "Are you a child or a teetotum?" said, as she took up another pair of needles. "You'll make me giddy soon, turning about like that." She was now working with 14 pairs at once, and Alice looking at her in great astonishment. "How can she knit with so many?" the puzzled child thought to herself. "She gets more and more like a porcupine every minute." "Can you row?" the sheep asked, holding her a pair of knitting needles as she. "Yes, a little, but not on land, and not with needles," Alice was beginning to say, when the needles turned into oars in her hands, and she found that they were in a little boat along between banks. So there was nothing for it but to do her best. "Feather!" cried the sheep as she took up another pair of needles. This didn't sound like any answer, so Alice said nothing but pulled away. There was something very queer about the as every now and then the oar got fast in it and would hardly come out again. "Feather!" the sheep cried again, taking more needles. "You'll be back directly." A dear little crab," thought Alice. "I should like that." "Did Feather?" the sheep cried angrily, taking up quite a bunch of needles. "Indeed I," said Alice. "You've said it very often and very loud. Please, where are the crabs?" "Yes," said the sheep, sticking some of the needles into her hair, and her hands were full. "Feather, I say." "Why do you say feather so often?" Alice asked, rather vexed. "I'm not a bird." "You are," said the sheep. "You're a little." This offended Alice a little, so there was no more conversation for a minute or two. The boat glided gently on, sometimes among beds of weeds, which made the oars in the water worse than ever, and sometimes under trees, but always with the last river banks frowning over their heads. "Please, there are some scented rushes," Alice cried in a sudden transport. "There really are, and such beauties." "You needn't say please to me about 'em," said the sheep, without looking up from her knitting. "I didn't put them there, and I'm not away." "No, but I mean, please, may we wait and pick some?" Alice pleaded. "Mind stopping the boat for a minute?" "How am I to stop it?" said the sheep. "If you leave off rowing, it'll stop." So the boat was left to drift down the stream as it would, till it lay in among the waving rushes, and then the little sleeves were carefully rolled up, and the plunged in elbow deep to get hold of the rushes a good long way down before breaking. And for a while Alice forgot all about the sheep and the knitting, and as she beside the boat, with just the ends of her tangled hair dipping into the water, with bright eager eyes she caught at one bunch after another of the drawing scented rushes. I only hope the boat won't tipple over, she said. Oh, what a lovely one! Only I couldn't quite reach it. And it certainly did seem a little pretty one that she couldn't reach. The prettiest are always, she said at last, with a sigh, and the obstinate is growing so far off as, with flushed cheeks and dripping hair and hands, she sank into her place and began to arrange her new-found treasures. It to her just then was the rushes had begun to lose all their scent and beauty from the very moment that she picked them. Even rushes, you know, last only a very little time, and these, being dream rushes, melted away almost as they lay in heaps at her feet. But Alice hardly noticed so many other curious things to think about. They hadn't gone much further before the oars got fast into the water and wouldn't come out again. So Alice explained it, and the consequence was that the handle of it caught her under the chin, and in spite of a series of "Oh! Oh!" from poor Alice, it swept her straight and down among the heap of rushes. However, she wasn't a bit hurt, and soon up a went on with her knitting all the while, just as if nothing had happened. That was a nice caught, she remarked as Alice got back into her place, very to find herself still in the boat. Was it? I didn't see it, said Alice, keeping the side of the boat into the dark water. I wish it hadn't let me go. I would so like a little crab to take home with me. But the sheep only laughed, went on with her knitting. Are there many crabs here? Alice said. Crabs and all sorts of things, said the sheep. Plenty of choice, only make up your mind. Do you want to buy? To buy? Alice echoed in a tone that was half frightened, for the oars and the boat in the river had vanished all in a moment, and then she was back in a dark shop. I should like to buy an egg, please, she said timidly. 5 farthing from one, 2 for two. Then 2 are cheaper than 1, Alice said in a surprised tone, taking out her purse. Only you must eat them both if you buy 2, said the sheep. Then I'll have 1, said Alice as she put the money down on the counter. She thought to herself, they mightn't be at all nice. The sheep took the money and put it away in a box. Then she said, I never put things in hands. That would never do. You must get it for yourself. And so saying, she went into the shop and set the egg upright on a shelf. I wonder why it wouldn't do, thought her way among the tables and chairs, for the shop was very dark toward the end. To get further away, the more I walked toward it. Let me see, why, it's got branches, I declare. How very odd to find trees growing here. And there's a little brook. Well, this is the very queerest shop I ever saw. So, wondering more and more at every step, as something turned into a tree hanging up to it, and she quite expected the egg to do the same. That is the end of the chapter, and we're about halfway through through the look Alice saw there. So I'm going to stop for today. That leaves us for tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.